former UN Ambassador John Bolton.
Hello. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, it's a pleasure to be back here in Oklahoma City. I've spent many days here during my legal career representing Kerr McGee, back when Kerr McGee was such a power here in Oklahoma. It was a great honor to meet Dean McGee back in the day and to work with all those folks, and I'm just delighted to be back here with you today on the most important subject we're going to face in the next year and a half, which is electing a real president to take over in Washington. And, you know, I think the first duty of the president under our Constitution is to protect the country and keep it safe. There are many important issues we face, including our economy, repealing Obamacare. You know them all. But ladies and gentlemen, don't you agree that when the country is in danger, everything else is secondary? And what we need as we look at the prospective Republican presidential nominees, which will not include me since I took myself out of the race last week, but what you should look at first and foremost is to make a judgment yourselves among all the people who are running or may be running. Do you have confidence that they can sit in the Oval Office and make the most consequential decisions that only a president can make about the threats we face and what we have to do to protect ourselves and our people? And only if they pass that test do you then go on to say, are they electable, are they consistent with my views on other issues? Think of it this way. Think back to 9/11 in 2001. And ask yourself, with respect to all the people who are running, how would they do on 9/11 and the days after? That, to me, is the critical question. Now, we're going to find that whomever we nominate very likely is going to face Hillary Clinton in the general election in November. And, you know, we meet on a day where, purely by coincidence, but not coincidence that's the Friday before the Memorial Day weekend, lo and behold, the State Department this afternoon is releasing about 300 of Hillary's Benghazi-related emails. You know, what a coincidence on a three-day weekend that after 4 years they finally have gotten around to it. Now, this is a very selective group of emails. It's off of her famous server, which wasn't part of the State Department system. I can tell you, as an alumnus of the State Department, if I had said, I think I'll do my emails on my own server at home, that I probably would have been strung up from a lamppost outside the State Department building. So it's very selective. It's what she and her lawyers have deigned to turn over to us. And even as we speak, the State Department website where the emails are posted, of course, is crashing and moving very slowly. So after hours, we still don't have them all out. But I tell you, we can already see in these emails contradictions to what Hillary said before. And let me just give you a couple of examples, because this document production on the subject of Benghazi is emblematic of what a Clinton presidency would look like. And it will be, the hallmark of that presidency will be deception. She said that she never used classified information on her personal email server. And already, just in these documents, which are simply the tip of the iceberg of what she did as Secretary of State, we find information that, while classified retroactively, was extraordinarily sensitive. The names of people arrested by the Libyan government in the days after the September 11, 2012 attack on our consulate. Now, honestly, ladies and gentlemen, Whether that information was classified at that precise moment or just classified now because it's about to be released, don't you think people should have the wit to understand that the names of the people who are being tagged for that murderous attack on our consulate is an extraordinarily sensitive subject that you should send only over a classified email system? And doesn't it also tell you that the disregard of sensitivity is going to show up again and again and again as she evaded the normal practices at the department? But I think the most telling information that we've seen so far in this limited number of emails is that there are repeated examples of Secretary of State Clinton being told in 2011 and 2012 that the security situation of our personnel in Tripoli and Benghazi was very precarious, that the country's government had fallen apart, that the threat from terrorist attacks was high, and that our people there were very concerned about it. Now, you'll recall in her limited public appearances to date that she has said, I didn't get involved in that security stuff. I have people who do that. Well, I have to say, when I heard that, I was stunned. I've worked for 6 different secretaries of state, every one of them coming from very different backgrounds. Every one of them cared about the safety of the Americans who worked for them in the State Department. And not a one of them would have missed the danger that our diplomats in Libya faced. And this was called to her attention repeatedly, and she didn't do anything about it. So when we ask the question, who is responsible for the tragedy of the murder of Ambassador Christopher Stevens and 3 other Americans in Benghazi, there's a very clear answer. It was Hillary Clinton. She says she didn't know what the security situation was. These documents alone, these are the first documents. It's only going to get worse for her after this, after the other documents come out. In these documents alone, we know that she was advised repeatedly of how dangerous it was. And she knew when she had to evacuate American personnel during the fight against Gaddafi in February of 2011. Do you think the United States Navy rescued our personnel from Tripoli? We had to rent a Greek ferry boat to come across the Mediterranean to take our people out. And even after that, we didn't do anything to increase security for our official personnel or private citizens in Libya. On the day of the attack, she has said in public testimony she never once spoke to Leon Panetta, the Secretary of Defense. Now, all of those 6 secretaries of state that I worked for would have been on the phone every 15 minutes to the Secretary of Defense saying, what can we do to protect our people? What did she do? She went home. She went home. Why? Because, telephones work. The secretaries of state that I worked for and the presidents I worked for, unlike Barack Obama, who went up to the White House residence, would have stayed in their offices until all of our people were safe. So who's responsible for the failure on September the 11th, 2012, to do what we might have done to protect our people? Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. And who's responsible in the aftermath of 9/11/2012 to defend American interest? The sum total of our response to that attack in Benghazi is we have arrested one person. We've arrested one person to give them a full due process criminal trial in this country. What that says to the terrorists and the state sponsors of terrorism around the world is an incredibly bad message. For weeks, Hillary Clinton was following the Obama line that this was all caused by that stupid Mohammed video, when these emails, among other things, make it clear they knew from the outset this was a terrorist attack. And the message that it sends is that the American ambassador in Libya, the personal representative of the President of the United States, under Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, you can murder the president's personal representative and get away with it. That's the lesson that was sent. And there's no worse lesson that the terrorists, the state sponsors of terrorism, and our adversaries around the world could learn. And you have never once heard Hillary Clinton criticize the Obama administration for its failure to exact retribution and retaliate against the murderers of 4 American citizens. This is the kind of absence of leadership that Hillary Clinton will bring to the White House. And I think this is as clear an example as you can get that the Clinton presidency, God forbid if there is one, will be a continuation on domestic as well as international affairs of the Obama administration. Hillary Clinton is Barack Obama's ideological twin, and let's not forget that. There isn't any ambiguity about where Hillary Clinton stands on the issues. It's been clear for a long time. You know, she and her husband were a year ahead of me at law school. So I like to say I've been burdened with them 20 years longer than the rest of the country. And I think the way you are at that time of life, whether it's law school or grad school or whatever you're doing, is pretty much the way you are. Philosophically, back then, not that we were drinking buddies, don't get me wrong, but philosophically back then, Hillary Clinton was a radical, and she's a radical today. The political commentators talk about her tacking and maneuvering within the Democratic Party to fend the left off, and they talk about how she's trying to get to the left of Elizabeth Warren. Ladies and gentlemen, she doesn't have to get to the left of Elizabeth Warren. She's already there. And I think we'll see the evidence of that. Benghazi is only the most visible, the most tragic example of the failure of 6 years of Obama-Clinton policies against terrorism. They don't believe there should be a war against terrorism. They told us for the first 4 years that the war on terrorism was essentially over, and that we didn't need to worry about it. We could treat it as a law enforcement matter, as if the Boston Marathon bombing was the equivalent of knocking over the local Starbucks, or the attack we just saw in Garland, Texas, was just criminal behavior. We are in a war against terrorism, ladies and gentlemen, and we are losing that war in a very serious way. What we're seeing in the Middle East today is moving from a situation where we have a crisis in Libya or a crisis in Yemen or a crisis in Iraq to the entire region dissolving into chaos. This is the most dangerous the Middle East has been in living memory. And every indication is it's simply going to get more dangerous. ISIS today, in what used to be Iraq and Syria, I think those countries basically have disappeared from the map. ISIS controls territory larger than the country of Great Britain. It has revenues, it has a currency, it has a central bank, it has a national budget, which puts it ahead of us. They are creating a new country in the Middle East, and it will be a magnet for radical Islamicist terrorists who can come to this country with valid American passports, valid European passports, that we will not be able to detect. And it's not just a question of if an attack from an ISIS-trained terrorist will occur, but when. And the real danger is not isolated terrorist attacks. The real danger is that this time, after years of attempting to do so, the terrorists will get their hands on chemical, biological, or, God forbid, nuclear weapons. Which brings me to the most dangerous subject of all, and the biggest failure, which is the president's surrender to the Ayatollahs in Tehran. We are negotiating a deal, the beginnings of which occurred under Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, which gives away the most fundamental issues before the talks even begin, conceding that Iran can have any uranium enrichment program. These people have demonstrated by a record over decades they will not honor any agreement they make on the nuclear front. They cannot be trusted, and we cannot be sure that we can verify when they violate the agreement. I wouldn't allow the regime in Tehran a spare electron, let alone nuclear power plants and uranium enrichment techniques. Together with North Korea, they pose a threat of nuclear proliferation, the dangers of which we will live with for decades. Because if Iran crosses the nuclear finish line, which they're poised to do as a result of this catastrophic deal that the president's trying desperately to sign, inevitably Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey will get nuclear weapons as well. This is what proliferation is all about. This is why we need a president to be elected in 2016 who can make hard decisions around the world to protect America, to protect its allies like Israel from the threat of nuclear destruction. It's not enough to say we're concerned about states like Iran and North Korea having nuclear weapons. We need a country that has the strength to deter our adversaries. We need a president who is proud of America, who's proud of America's strength, who wants to avoid conflict by having the strength that deters other nations from taking us on. We have a president today, aided by a former Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, who believed that it was American strength that was provocative, that it was our actions in the world that induced radicals and others to take hostile steps against us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is like looking through the wrong end of a telescope. It's not American strength that's provocative. It's American weakness that's provocative. And our task, the task of all of you in this room and across the country in 2016 is to nominate a Republican for the presidency who understands the burden that our country has, that it must have in the world to preserve our way of life here at home. A strong America here depends on a strong American presence internationally. It's not something to be ashamed of, it's something to be proud of. It's something to embrace for future generations of America to enjoy, which is why national security needs to be at the center of the debate as we select our nominee, and why it will be, inevitably, the centerpiece of the argument that our nominee uses to beat Hillary Clinton in 2016. Thank you very much.